another episode of Speciality Sessions with me, your host, Natasha Klymczuk. Today, I am joined by Martin John, CEO of KRAHN Chemie. For anybody that doesn't know you and doesn't know KRAHN, will you just tell us a little bit about yourself and about the business?
Yeah, sure. My name is Martin John. I joined KRAHN Chemie last year as a CEO, and I have been spending 3 decades so far in the chemical industry, and it's a pleasure to be with you, Natasha.
What's really interesting about your background is you've spent a lot of your career in large global producers, mainly Clariant. What made it the right moment for you to step into the CEO role at KRAHN under a year ago?
Yeah, for me, I think it was a combination of a few things. First of all, timing was relevance and meaning. These were the factors that were driving me to this decision. After more than 30 years in the chemical industry, and as you said, and mostly in large global structures, I've reached a point where I asked myself, where can I make the most tangible difference now? And as a distributor like KRAHN, this company sits right at the intersection of what matters: customer needs, producer strategies, regulation, big topic, sustainability pressure, supply chain volatility, technical challenges. So this whole package is really, really interesting. It's not abstract, I would say. And you see the impact of decisions immediately in customer satisfaction, in supplier trust, and of course, the way the teams work together. And personally, it was also about responsibility. I wanted a role where leadership is a bit less about just setting direction. It's really more about building an environment where people can perform, grow, feel proud of the work. And KRAHN offered me exactly that, a very strong foundation, great people, and the opportunity to shape the next chapter of growth for the group.
I'm always interested when people make moves from manufacturing to distribution. What specifically attracted you to moving from a producer like Clariant to a more technically focused distributor?
Yeah, chemical distribution, of course, from a producer's side, I always was working with distributors around the world. And I think I developed a pretty good sense of what differentiates a good from a very good distributor. Chemical distribution is a very interesting role in the value chain because you are extremely close to what I like to call the moment of truth, meaning when the material has to perform a customer process. A producer has certainly a very deep product expertise. A producer is literally owning the molecule. And as a distributor, you are adding, I think, a bit more depth and something different even. And that is about application breadth across multiple suppliers. You have a very intimate understanding of the local industries you are serving, and very important, speed. You're very often the first to hear the formulation failed, or regulation is changing. What shall I do? We need a safer alternative, or my line is down, right? So what attracted me was the opportunity to build a business around problem solving and relationships, and not mainly about assets. And in many cases, in our business, we act like an extension of both the customer and the producer.
And when you made that move, what is the biggest mindset shift that you've had to make? Because it is a totally different environment.
Well, I'm not trying to generalize, but as a producer, you are often driving things from the inside out. Of course, you have fixed assets, precious assets. You have portfolios, global strategies, and a tendency to push those into the markets, right? And as a distributor CEO, you're emphasizing a bit more the outside in, I would say, and that's happening every day. So your product goes clearly beyond the materials, and you're emphasizing a lot the reliability, the technical support, the responsiveness, and also the trust across many producers, and in our case, thousands of customers. And the biggest mindset shift to me was it still is, success is less about what you sell and more about how you enable the value. So how quickly you solve the problems, how transparently you communicate, how you reduce complexity for customers and principals, and everywhere, of course, but in particular in distribution, I believe that trust is your license to operate.
When we originally spoke in the preparation for this podcast, something that you said to me really stuck out, which was you said that chemistry wasn't a passion from the start, but you've been in the industry for over 30 years. So what's kept you in the industry, considering it wasn't something you were passionate about in the beginning?
Yeah, perhaps I comment briefly how I entered actually in the industry, and maybe this is an answer you don't hear that often. But I would say my entry into this industry was a mixture of pragmatism, but also a coincidence. Because as a teenager, actually my real passion was cars, and it is still today actually. But back then it was not chemistry. My father, he worked for Höchst. At the time, Höchst was one of the world's largest pharmaceutical and chemical companies. And in the early 90s, he suggested to me to apply for a 2-year apprenticeship program there right after school. So I followed his advice. I applied, I was accepted, and that's basically how I entered the industry. So what started, honestly, without a strong emotional connection, quickly turned into something much more meaningful to me, because I saw, first of all, the potential for personal development. Clearly, this was a motivator throughout my career. But I also saw the breadth of opportunities, and I was attracted by the complexity of the business until today. And so what kept me in the industry was the realization that chemistry is everywhere. Of course, we who work in this industry know that, right? We can also call this industry rightfully the mother of all industries. We are enabling innovation across almost every sector, like healthcare, construction, mobility, for example. And we also bring together talented people who enjoy solving complex, often ambiguous problems. So this industry attracts pragmatic problem solvers, and working with engineers, formulators, chemists, entrepreneurs, I really enjoy that. So people who take pride in doing things very properly. And the industry is forcing you to learn continuously, right? So if you stop learning, you fall behind very quickly. And this relates not just to technical or commercial matters, but also to cultural developments. So in summary, the combination smart, engaged people and challenging puzzle pieces with real world impact, that is what ultimately created my passion. And obviously, it kept me engaged for more than 3 decades now.
Something that you said just then that I think is really interesting about this opportunity for growth. And I think what is so great about the chemical industry is that you can start as one thing and end as completely another. I speak to lots of people, and I actually recorded an episode with Marcus Jordan, who's on episode 5, the CEO at IMCD. And, he started off in a technical role, joined IMCD as an account manager, and then now is running the business as a CEO and in various different functions. So you get the opportunity to move around and to really develop the depth. And I imagine a similar trajectory for yourself at Clariant, moving around in different roles and getting the opportunity, which ultimately fills up your toolbox, right? Which all leads you to the role that you're doing today. What parts of your leadership, for want of a better term, toolbox, from that experience has transferred well? And I suppose my question is, what didn't?
Yeah, well, great question. I really got a huge toolbox. I'm really thankful for all the experience I was able to make at Höchst, at Clariant, at Südchemie, and of course, by working with many, many other companies in basically all regions around the globe, right? So what's transferred now specifically well, I would say, to my current role and my environment is the clarity and the discipline, and also I would highlight stakeholder management. So in global producer environments, you learn to communicate, for example, strategy very effectively. You learn to align diverse interests and also to make big decisions under uncertainty. And And those muscles, I must say, are extremely useful also in my environment, my role now. What did not transfer easily and automatically, to come to this part of your question, I would say, is the speed and intimacy of a mid-sized European-focused organization. In distribution, people expect you to be even closer, to be even more present, more direct, and also to be less process, right? So also decision cycles can be much faster, and the consequence of decisions are extremely immediate. And maybe one more thing, also in large organizations, in my experience, typically structure carries a lot of the load. And in smaller settings, I think the leadership behavior carries more.
There will be senior leaders listening to this podcast, listening to this episode, who are considering a move in their career, right? And often that is from larger organizations to more agile ones, whether that's manufacturers or distributors, and often much later in the career. What do you think they should think hard about before saying yes to an opportunity like that?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure these questions are quite individual to the person thinking about this, but I can offer a few perspectives from my own journey. The first question could be, are you ready to lead closer to the ground? You will be nearer to customers, to teams, to issues. And I can only share, for me, this is extremely rewarding. It is also very demanding. There's basically no way to hide behind layers, right? Another point or question, are you comfortable with less infrastructure? Meaning, you may have fewer specialized functions and less global machinery around you. And that means actually that you need to build capability deliberately, ideally without adding bureaucracy.
Mm.
And the third point, that might be even the most important one if I have to prioritize, the question whether you genuinely enjoy developing people. In any company, I think especially in a distribution company, talent is the multiplier.
Mm.
Our people are the assets, so to speak, right? So if you don't get energy from coaching, from aligning, from building leaders, you might feel frustrated very quickly. And perhaps I add one more thing, be super honest about ego. The title changes, but the job is service, right? So if you enter with, I will fix everything, you will lose people. But if you enter more with curiosity and respect, I think you will gain speed.
What must be really hard to balance, especially when you're new in the role, people looking to you, one, for guidance, and two, to go, I wonder what he's going to do with this, you know? How do you balance the patience that you need to deliver the deliverables, but also with the pressure to show up and show progress as a new CEO? Because I think that's the silver bullet question, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I have a silver or even a golden answer to this question. But honestly, that's a daily challenge. It's a daily challenge. And I would even say partly it's a struggle, right? And I'm not sure whether it's an advantage or disadvantage, but I was born as a quite impatient person, right? So, but what I'm really trying to do, and I'm not sure whether I succeed every day, but I try to separate progress from activity. So early on, when joining a new organization, or especially like in my case, a new company, it is extremely tempting to launch many initiatives, to be and perhaps even to look decisive, right? It's super tempting. But if you create too many moving parts, you will drain focus and you may even drain credibility, right? Which is a super precious currency for any person. So the way I like to show progress is actually showing in three ways. The first important point is always decision clarity. So making a few important choices very visible in the organization. And the second part then will be to have an operating rhythm, I would call it. So it's about creating cadence, how we review priorities, how we escalate issues, how we learn, basically, right? And the third point is quick wins, but with meaning. So small changes that remove friction for customers and teams, right? And do you have always a perfect balance? Of course not, right? But I think you will keep these three things in mind. That helps you to move with discipline without creating a change fatigue in the organization.
I do think that comes with practice. There are lots of mistakes that you need to make along the way to get yourself to a good place to be able to deliver like that. And you and I have spoken about learning the hard way when leaders run ahead of the organization. And you've said to me before that you've been maybe guilty of that before in the past. What did those sorts of experiences teach you personally?
Yeah, lessons learned. I think we could even do a whole podcast session for this one. But in this context, I want to maybe touch on one topic. I learned basically that strategy is not what you announce, right? It's always what people are ready to execute. And when leaders run too far ahead, and that happened to me in my career, teams may not, but they are not aligned, right? So then what you get is silent resistance that results in slow execution, confusion, perhaps even frustration. And people might feel changes done to them and not done with them, right? So the lesson for me was that speed comes more from alignment. Because if you invest early in listening, explanation, and involvement, you increase speed because you actually go faster later, right? You don't spend months undoing misunderstandings, and that's why I think fast beginning is not the best recipe.
And you've described it to me before as change is a marathon rather than a sprint, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. Why do you think a slower start does often lead to better outcomes?
Yeah, I actually see change as a marathon. Well, I never run one myself, so I actually don't even know what I'm talking about. But I think we all know what a marathon is, right? And I would even say that change is a marathon without a finish line, right? Because you never get there. But what you do is you're hitting milestones, and I think they are super crucial because they help you celebrating, they help you re-energizing. I mean, of course, the whole organization. The marathon continues. In any case, let's call it a journey. It is about pacing and endurance, and not running the first mile at full speed, although might feel tempting. Because if you sprint at the beginning, big reorganizations, many initiatives, you might impress for a quarter, but you might lose the organization for the entire year, right? Because people get exhausted, priorities blur, and execution quality drops. So a slower start allows you to build the foundations, the shared understanding, the leadership alignment, super important, and to clear decision rights, the skills, and the operating rhythm. And once that is in place, you can accelerate more sustainably and really manage change.
I'm going to give your own words back to you now because I liked it, which was, and I'm going to quote Martin John 2026, which is no beginning without passion, no finish without discipline. And I think that's something I'm going to use moving forward. I liked it when you said it. Where does that philosophy come from?
Well, I have seen many transformations from different perspectives, of course, in the hierarchy levels. And I've seen some of them fail for two opposite reasons, I would say. Some start with lots of excitement, right? Great presentations, big words, lots of energy put in there, but they don't survive the first headwinds. And that's what I call a discipline problem. Others have strong processes and control, but no emotional pull, no sense of purpose, no belief, right? So people may comply, but they don't commit. And that is to me more of a passion problem. So the phrase you have just mentioned, I use sometimes just as a reminder that passion gives the start a momentum, but discipline gives the journey more the results, right? And of course, leadership, you need both. And I would say, especially in an environment that we all know very well right now, that means a tough environment. I think it really helps to address both elements.
And it's interesting that we've spoken about lots of themes here around discipline, but yet still getting things going, patience, things been a marathon, not a sprint. But when you joined the business, you committed to a 4-month listen and learn phase, which I imagine now, understanding a bit more about you in this conversation, was probably quite challenging. What were you deliberately listening for?
Yeah, of course. First of all, I listened to everything I was hearing, but what I was really looking for in particular, perhaps three things. The first one, to understand deeply how we create value in practice. This may sound a bit strange because, of course, we all know what distribution basically is, right? But to really understand how we as a company create value in practice was super important to me. So where do we truly differentiate for customers and producers? And on the other side, where are we just busy? The second point of high interest was, and of course still is, where does friction live? The handoffs, the interfaces, unclear decisions, local versus group priorities, right? Because friction is expensive as it slows service. And the third element, to understand also quite quickly, what are people proud of and what do they worry about? Because the pride shows to me what's to protect, and the worry shows more to what to address early.
What assumptions did that period challenge for you?
Yeah, well, one assumption was that the biggest improvement opportunity would be a big project. But in reality, many opportunities sit in rather small, repetitive things. So how do we manage data? How we coordinate across entities? And we have quite a few of them. How do we respond to customers, or how do we handle exceptions? And another assumption was that people might resist change mainly because they don't want it. But I think often, if there's resistance, they resist because they have seen change done poorly before, too fast, too vague, too top down. And I think once you understand that, you can design change differently and better.
And you obviously have to go through that period of getting to know the business, getting under the skin, getting to know the people and the personalities in the leadership team, and cascading down. But how do you decide when it's time to stop listening and when to start doing? Because that's also the balance as well, isn't it? You can't just listen forever, right? Or nothing gets done.
Yeah, also here, where's the silver bullet, right?
Yeah.
But well, first of all, ideally
You
you
don't
never
stop listening. Yeah.
right.
Correct myself.
First of all, ideally you never stop listening, right? But you certainly reach a point where waiting becomes a decision too. So for me, the signal is when patterns repeat. So when you hear the same or at least similar issues, because people phrase it differently sometimes, the same issues from customers, from sales, from operations, or from leaders, then it's clearly time to act. And the second signal is when not acting creates uncertainty. I think people can handle change very well, but they often struggle with ambiguity. So you start acting when you can give clarity on direction, priorities, and also what will not change. That's also quite important. And I think it's important to do that even if everything is not fully designed yet.
And when new leadership comes into an organization, that often equates to change because things need addressing and things need to improve. How far do you tend to go in changing structures and strategy?
Well, I'm personally very cautious with structural change, especially for the sake of change. To me, structures are a tool. I've never seen a perfect one, by the way, only good, maybe best compromises. So structures are not the goal, right? So if you reorganize too early, that's a huge risk. You essentially redesigning without understanding the system. So my approach is define first how you want to win, and then adjust structure, and only do it where it blocks that strategy.
You've also taken on a leadership role in the European market that's incredibly challenging right now. How do you separate cyclical pressure from structural change? Because I think that is something that will be in a lot of people's minds at the moment.
Yeah, well, it's really difficult, I think, to separate the many challenges we are dealing with. But what I'm trying to do is to look at what would reverse if the economy is improving and what would not. So on cyclical pressure, you look at things like demand fluctuations, inventory corrections, short-term pricing volatility, for example, and those usually improve when the economy recovers. On structural change, looking at energy and cost position versus other regions, consolidation, of course, higher sustainability expectations, the increase in compliance complexity, but also customer behavior changes like wanting faster service, more transparency, more technical help, right? So the practical test is asking yourself, if growth returns next year, does the issue you're looking at disappear? And if the answer is no, it's structural, and that means you need to adapt to the business model and not hope that things will go away, or not waiting it out, basically.
There will be lots of people listening to this episode who are future leaders within the distribution segment. And I think there are skills and capabilities that weren't as critical 20 years ago, for example, that are now. What do you think they are?
A few come to mind. First, I would say systems thinking, meaning understanding the whole value chain, not just your function, wherever you start, right, in a career. Especially in distribution, it is clearly an interface business, I would say. Secondly, the second topic is data and digital comfort. So I think it's not about becoming a tech expert, but knowing how data drives speed, how it drives quality, compliance, and customer experience is definitely a crucial topic. And change, leadership, and culture building. Markets are moving faster and faster. So leaders must build learning organizations, right? It's not just about managing current performance levels, which is challenging enough, but it's really about building learning organizations to make sure they keep adapting and developing. And I will add one more topic. This is around stakeholder diplomacy. You are balancing customers, principals, regulators, and internal teams all the time. And that requires, besides commercial and technical skills, also maturity.
Something that I'm very passionate about, and something I know you are as well, is about young people coming into the industry. If you were advising a young professional entering the chemicals market today, what would you tell them?
I would tell them, actually, things partly I was told when I entered. But of course, there are a few updates here. First of all, I believe that the chemical industry is a place where you can build a career with meaning if you stay curious. And another advice would be learn the basics very well. And with basics, I mean safety, quality, ethics. They are clearly non-negotiable in this industry. And then build the breadth, meaning spend time close to customers, learn supply chain realities, and also learn how decisions get made. And choose roles, ideally, where you can learn faster than you can perform. Early in your career, of course, throughout the career, but in particular early in your career, learning is the best investment. And the final advice would be don't chase titles too early. Rather chase problems worth solving and also chase leaders worth learning from. And very likely the titles will follow.
And what has been your biggest personal leadership lesson since joining KRAHN?
Well, I think that the fastest way to earn trust is consistency. I don't think that people need a CEO to be perfect or who is perfect. I think they need someone who's clear, who's fair, who's present. And if you say you will do something, do it. If you don't know something, also say it. And if you make a mistake, own it. I think that's a very important combination that appears to work very well in my new environment. And I've also learned again that culture is built in small moments. So, for example, how you react under pressure, how you handle bad news, how you give credit. I think actually these are the moments that are real leadership work.
And finally, one last question that I'm asking everyone that's appeared in the first season of Specialty Sessions. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
All right. I would say don't confuse speed with progress. So coming back to my lesson I shared earlier, right? Be ambitious. Yes, absolutely. But also invest more in relationships, in learning and self-awareness earlier, and ask for feedback sooner. And remember that leadership is not about having the best answer in the room. It's really more about creating the conditions for others in the room to do their best work.
And what a nice note to end the podcast on, Martin. Thanks so much for joining me.
I thank you so much, Natasha. My pleasure.